Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Durga Das. I'm the founder of AERO NERO, and welcome to the Impact Funding Summit. I believe you've had a good day so far, though we started a little late in the morning. But I have a very interesting panel of speakers with me, and I'm sure you will enjoy the conversation we will have with them in the next hour or so. Let me introduce them to you. We have Ashish Kulkarni, who's the former CEO of Reliance Big Animation, current founder of Punnaryug. Interesting name, since that is what we're contemplating today, all of us as a collective people. And I'm sure we'll discuss that a little bit more with Ashish in our conversation. We have Mr. C. Raghuraman, founder and CEO of eHand Energy. Welcome, Raghu. And we have Srinivas Narayan, Group MD of Assist, which is the Asia Society for Social Improvement and Sustainable Transformation. A little bit of background on all of our guests. Srinivas Narayan, or Srini as he is affectionately called, is a chemical engineer by profession. Graduated with his MBM in 1998. He loved Philippines so much, he just decided to stay back and create something in the Philippines. And I think that decision of his has probably led to creating such social impact over the last 10, 15 years that he has been in his endeavor to make a difference. He was inspired by his mother, herself a social activist and a teacher. And his father, interestingly, was a volleyball player for the Indian team. Srini himself is a fellow cricketer, so I'm thrilled to introduce him to you, being a fellow cricketer myself. And I think between his father's need to be a champion sportsman and his mother as a social activist, Srini had no choice but to also follow the path of doing social good. And so he started an NGO Assist in the Philippines in 2003 and has spent a lot of his time building that into an organization that has offices in 5 countries, implemented over 200 social development projects in over 10 countries. Besides that, he has then moved on to, he originally started a program where he passed on to his partners, and then Assist is now what he's been driving since 2003. Let me introduce another guest to you. Raghuraman is a founder and president CEO. For the last 30 years, with his leadership, he has been building a global organization in the space of automobiles, pharmaceuticals, electronics, IT, ITES, and telecom. He studied in the very prestigious school, Indian Institute of Technology in Durga, and the Indian Statistical Institute in Calcutta. What very few people do know about or don't know about Raghu, which I happen to find out and which I think is fascinating, is that he takes part or has taken part in several Himalayan truck rallies. I mean, I know the Himalayan Power Rally, but it was the first time I heard about the Himalayan Truck Rally. He's a prolific writer, and he's a very well-followed travel blogger. He's traveled to over 30 countries. One interesting thing that he mentioned to me is that he started a trekking company because of his line of business and we'll hear more about that business soon. But what they created as part of that business was a very interesting social endeavor called Hot Shower and Cold Beer at 10,000 feet. The name is fascinating. It should inspire many of us to take up trekking for nothing else but the hot shower and the cold beer. And we will talk a little bit more about that in a little while. During this time of COVID, a lot of us have been locked down at home, and all of us being entertained by some form of entertainment or even edutainment in our homes. A lot of that credit goes to my third speaker today. Ashish Kulkarni is known to be a very colorful personality in the animation industry. The other side of Hollywood, Ashish is a very, very well-known figure. He has grown with several studios, including big animation, Reliance's big animation, as well as Jadu Works. He's currently driving this company called Punnaryug, and I would love to find out a little bit more about Punnaryug. I had the pleasure of meeting Ashish recently, and sorry to say when he lost his mother subsequently. But that one incident of spending time with him made me understand him as a person. He's a man of a large heart, and his need to wanting to educate people through entertainment, I'm sure has created so much inspiration for youngsters all over the world. And we will talk to him about his journey as well as how things will transpire in the days to come. So, welcome, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Introduction.
My pleasure. So let's start off with Ashish. Ashish, would you like to share with us the way we'd like to take this conversation forward is let's talk about our respective industries before COVID happened, right? And the journey to that industry, the purpose behind it, why you did what you're doing, and what the challenges were that you faced then and where you were before COVID struck. The reason for this line of discussion is because all three of you have created impact in this space, and it's a very meaningful space in all three aspects going into post-COVID session. So before we get into collaborative models of what we will all do together post-COVID, I want the audience to understand the three industries in its own uniqueness and the impact and effect it had even before COVID. So Ashish, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Durga. In fact, when actually I was, into advertising, and I actually realized at one point in time in late 90s that, the digital prints were taking over. And I was in Chennai and I could always relate to these guys who were painting Rajnikant and Kamal Hassan 40 feet, and they didn't require a digital print. They could paint it so well. And I was contemplating starting an animation studio from advertising because that was a new space opening up at that point in time in 1997, 98, 99. And all of a sudden, all these guys lost their jobs because the digital prints took over. Yeah. So I brought 72 of them to my studio in Hyderabad that time. And I started teaching them, Photoshop and few other things, and they started creating art for animation. And then I realized that there is a place called Tanjavur, Mahabalipuram, Channapatna, Ramnagaram, and Krishnanagar in West Bengal. And I started going to all these places, picking up youngsters who have never been to school, and bringing them over to the studios, because when the animation started in India, people thought learning computers is learning animation, and they'd never realized that it's a creative input and a creative eye and a design thinking that is more important. Software is an enabler, although the final output is on the software, but you need to be an artist first.
Absolutely.
And I think that took a lot of time for us to build, because in our school education we don't have marks for creativity, performing arts and design, even sports. And that's why people actually try to do it like a hobby, and then try to make a profession out of it is always a fallout of what you're not able to do. And that's why you pursue what you do well in hobby. And many parents came to me saying that, oh, this guy has failed, he is a dropout, but now you try to do something with him because he can draw very well, or he can act very well, or he can sing very well, or he can mimic very well. And we actually always try to fit them into one of the roles of our ideation to script and script to screen, because all the creativity was involved. And then I realized that every art form that exists in India, if I go to these pockets and pick up these guys, bring them to the studio, teach them the latest softwares, their foundation was so strong that I didn't have to do, even the people from art schools couldn't do it, what these kids can do, because from their childhood, they are trained with their parents or brothers, sisters, uncles to sculpt or to do, carvings or to do something. And I think that's something which drove me very strongly. And that's when the birth of Punnaryug Art Vision Private Limited came up, that I wanted to create an art village, which I'm creating right now. But the thing was that constantly creative guys were losing jobs, and many studios were shutting down for some other country had a cost arbitrage, and it moved from India to China or to Malaysia or to Taiwan, and suddenly the studios had issues here. And that's why I decided that we need to have an ecosystem that can allow studios to grow up and shrink as the projects are done. And that's what happens with the feature films and the ad films and the television shows, that people come together to do a project and they're again on their own. But they actually are known for their skills, so they get hired again and again. But this model was not possible in animation and visual effects because you had to work in a studio, you have to be employed. But then when there is no work for 1 month or 2 months, all the studios shut down because the bottom line gets wiped away. And that's what has happened in the COVID times, and we will talk about it a little later. But that's where I started creating an ecosystem where traditional art form pockets, we actually had a right ingredient, and then we started, using traditional art to go to the universities. And I went to 83 universities, and they always used to refer me to engineering. And I used to tell them it's an art subject, it's not engineering. But they always relate visual effects and animation to, to technology. But finally, I succeeded in about 17 universities now, and we have formal education available. And the thing that I struggled with was with the UGC and AICT, that most of the models were that they had to write a 3 hours written exam at the end of the year or end of the semester. Whereas if there is an actor or a singer or a dancer, if they have to write a written exam, then they're bound to fail. So the assessment patterns had to be changed, that you needed to make more 90% of assessment on practicals or their performance rather than giving them a written exam. And this took a lot of time, but today I'm very happy that we succeeded in 17 universities running my curriculum, including Whistling Woods and FTI Pune, and many Annamalai University to Manipal to lovely professional university to Chitkara and many others. But more than that, there are more than 27 universities in India today having creative and performing arts programs. And it was a net result of the last 2 decades of a push that we created. We want to push that even into the school curriculums and see how this can be brought in at a level playing field with science and commerce, so that people can pursue creativity, performing arts, design, and sports and earth sciences at a level playing field. So that's exactly what I've been doing.
Congratulations, are fabulous. And interestingly, looks like you were doing what people are asking about, what to do post-COVID, when you brought, people who lost their livelihood doing, hoardings and paintings, and brought them into animation. You did that 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So I'm sure your ideas of what you're going to do and suggest for post-COVID, I'm sure people are eagerly waiting, but we'll come back to you in a minute. I'd love to hear from Raghu on his business and what he built over the last 20, 30 years, and how that has impacted society pre-COVID.
Thank you, Durga. Wonderful listening to Ashish. I actually had a corporate career for quite some time, so I was chasing money and only money for quite some time, as it happens in corporate. And I suddenly had this experience once in Uttarakhand is my second home, or I consider it equally my home. So I was traveling in the hills and driving through the interior parts. I saw the children walking up to the school, up on the slope for quite steep for more than an hour. So I stopped them and asked them, how much do you walk? So they walk an hour and a half or two, one way to go to the school, to a lousy school. There's no teacher, or there's somewhat some teacher, and then they walk 2 hours. So I actually hit upon this idea that we need to provide digital education in the year 2000. So when there was no internet of this speed, 64 kbps was luxury, 128 kbps was super luxury.
Yes.
I actually set up an ISP company. I had a category B ISP license for Western UP. So that was my first social venture, because I wanted to put together a computer with courseware and where the children can learn on their own. So Khan Academy and EduRite, there was a company called EduRite in Bangalore, and IBM the hardware. And I set up the wireless link because I had category B license. I used technology IIT Madras had created called Connect, and I did everything. And our engineer the place and said, "Sir, bijli kahan? Where is the electricity?" So that's when we realized that, oh my God. So we took something for granted that the system will run. We just had a small UPS, which will give a half an hour backup. And that's it. We inaugurated and ran it for half an hour and shut it down. So there was electricity in that place. And 20 years now, it hasn't changed much. The interior parts of Uttarakhand are still pretty bad and still children walk a long way. Only thing is that we have set up some microgrids so that we took it as a mission. So we have, many villages which are off the road, off the grid, and we have set up the microgrid and try to help the communities to get the basic, lighting. So this is a very difficult thing, and sometimes I wonder. I pulled my son into this, and I wonder sometimes whether I'm doing the right thing because there's no money. We can't be called an NGO because we don't want to be called an NGO because we are doing some commercial things but at low profit. So it's a story of struggle. It's a story of failures. It's a story of trying to wake up. So that's what we have been doing for 10 years. Fail again, stand up again, fail again, stand up again, and some funds. Some people are kind enough to support with some funds. So we blended with some commercial capital and philanthropic capital. So in fact, I believe that I have created a model, not me alone. I mean the whole ecosystem. What I call as blended finance, where there's a right mix of philanthropic capital and the commercial capital for such things. And this is a need, as we go along, we'll talk. So to me, the COVID is actually a nightmare because we were trying to get these the poorest of the poor, out of their poverty to some extent by at least providing them light and basic electricity so that they can do their day-to-day work better. But with COVID affecting us and our ability to service these, villages, it's a nightmare. We really don't have answer. We know we have the bandwidth or runway to run for another 4 or 5 months. And that's the time the winter will set in. In all these villages where we have set up the microgrid, this is the time we maintain. We change the batteries, we change the inverters, we get the system completely overhauled because no one can approach these villages in the winter. It's 10-foot snow, 12-foot snow. The farthest village that we were trying to do is 83 kilometers by foot, one way.
Wow.
And that's the place now the Nepal has actually taken it into their map. So there is a wind turbine, and we have. So this is my fascination to be in love with Himalayas and to hang around there forever and keep doing something for the community. But thanks for bringing up this hot shower and cold beer because some of these villages that we have electrified happen to fall on some of the most beautiful trekking routes. If anyone in the audience know Har Ki Dun, so all the villages that we have electrified are on the Har Ki Dun route. So what we try to provide is a different experience to the trekker where they can go to the village and enjoy the local cuisine, the local culture, by which we integrate the local community work with the trekkers. Right now, none of the trekking companies do that. And we had a very successful launch last year, but because of COVID, we have to now cancel. But I think this is an activity which can stand up on its own because the cash flow model is based on how the trekkers support it. And there are thousands and thousands of people who are in love with Himalayas and they would like to do anything that they can contribute to. So we look forward to a new, era after this disruption. There's going to be a lot of difficulty for social enterprises like us, but that's the way the life has been.
That's wonderful. A couple of points. I'm sure we're going to talk about the hot shower and cold beer again in the post-COVID discussion that we're going to have, because there are definitely ideas that we will be able to share, as well as I think the audience and the other, impact investors who are hopefully listening to us and who are participating in this fund, in this Impact Summit, will find a way to reach out and see how they can work with you. Having said that, one quick question. So, did you completely migrate away from creating education only into providing power, or is that still a combination that you worked with in the past?
No. The task of providing electricity itself is very challenging and it's quite technical because we started off with wind as the source of energy, small wind turbines. And so the process of manufacturing the turbine in India, because we had a joint venture with a South African company, and we had to set up the plant in India. So we became a technologist. From the social angle, we plunged into technology. It took some time to come out, and because I'm on the board of several other NGOs, and particularly United Way, I kept this, my touch with the social sector, and I kept going. So now we think that we have a right blend in our own team, in the management team and the execution team. We have the right blend of technologies as well as impact-oriented thinkers.
Perfect. So on to Srini. I would like us to hear from you and your time in Philippines. And Srini has a beautiful wife, Sugi, who participates with him in his endeavor to create social impact. So Srini, please do share with us what was the journey so far, and how that happened to be pre-COVID, and then we'll move on to how we can all converse on the post-COVID scenario.
Thank you, Durga. And it was fascinating to hear the two gentlemen, and before the session, I was led to understand they are from sort of the private sector, but they seem to be more NGO than me in many ways, And
Yes.
I also like to greet all the participants of the session. Greetings from Manila. We are close to 8 p.m. here. My journey here is 24 years old. I came here to study and venture, which was my school project way back when in '98, which interestingly enough was all about e-learning and environmental education. I produced my first e-learning using Ashish. You may not know, but in the Philippines, these were the guys who were the best animators once upon a time in the 60s and 70s. And every single Tom and Jerry animation production was happening in the Philippines way back when. And unfortunately, and probably good for India, they were never able to make the transition to the digital enablement in the animation space. But intrinsically highly talented people, and of course, as many would know in the IT-enabled industry, have great English capability and voice-over capability. So when I produced my first e-learnings, which were in CDs and big boxes in the way back when, in 2000, I had very hard time convincing people that this was the quality we could produce in the Philippines. So it led me to set up a company in Singapore in 2000, just to show that this was a product made in Singapore. It was like made in Singapore logo, but it was all being produced in the Philippines. And then we opened up in Malaysia and India, and I used to sell tons of them, and I was hardly, I've not even entered into the 30s. So each of my country partners would sell the CDs every month. I had produced about 10 titles, all related to industry, by the way, on health and safety, environment, and things like that, fire safety and stuff like that. And as I visited each of these countries every month, they would have made enough money for me to have a party, and I would just come back. So that was my experience in the private sector, actually. However, as I had explained to Durga, I was always very socially aware and conscious. I said I needed to use my knowledge of processes and my education and go into the non-profit world and try to make a difference. What would surprise many of you is, well, it may not be a surprise. There are 3.5 million, or 33 lakh, close to 33 lakh NGOs in India alone, and there are about another 3 million NGOs in Southeast Asia, for example, including some parts of the Far East, Japan and all that. So, in Asia alone, there are about 6 million NGOs. And if these guys were doing what they were meant to do, or what their intent was, and where their passions lie, I don't think we would have all this poverty as well. I mean, I don't think the NGOs were the reason for the poverty, but they would have solved the problems. But many of them, I think, lacked processes, lacked systems, lacked the ability to scale. They were very passionate people, but had very little processes. And that's what we tried to change in the whole NGO world in the last 10, 15 years. I wouldn't say we are very successful, but certainly we've been able to grow this quite dramatically in the last 15 years. As Durga mentioned, we have an office in Africa, we have an office in India, we are spread all over Southeast Asia. Apart from the offices, we do have individual representatives who manage projects in countries. So as part of this whole journey, I also set up something called Asian NGO, which is a free platform available. People just have to go to asianngo.org to click on it. And what will be surprising is that on an average, there are about 15 to 25 grants available per week for NGOs. Now, most NGOs don't even know that so many grants are available, actually. And I can guarantee you, as much as I have about 3 full-time people and a lot of tools being used to track these grants, we are probably hardly scratching the surface. So there's a lot of money available on one hand, and a lot of NGOs whom I always, try to rip them, saying, do you know the definition of an NGO? It means no good organization. Let's first fix ourselves before we try to go and save the world. We can't save ourselves for Christ's sakes. So that's how I would start. And within the NGO community, I'm very, very well known. I run a publication also called Impact. And in the NGO community, I'm reasonably well known in the sense, as much as I critique it, I think we've also built a lot of things which helps the NGO sector. So, so we are a close community. There has been a convergence happening in the social impact sector over the last 10 years. There's the advent of impact capital. There's the advent of social enterprises. There is, of course, corporates have been doing CSR quite a bit, but beyond CSR, there are also B corporations, as they call it. So there has been some sort of a convergence. I won't use the word collaboration. We'll talk about that post-COVID collaboration possibilities later. But there has been some sort of a convergence which has been happening in the social impact sector. And I'm very optimistic that, even the people who were not as focused before are going to get very focused henceforth. And the pandemic is certainly a wake-up call, but I would look at it for good reasons, wake-up call for the good reasons. I know there is a temporary disruption in many of the things we are doing. A typical NGO is like an ambulance chaser, as they would call them. You would have lawyers running after ambulances because, either you could get to sue the person who banged you, or you could try and protect the person who actually created the accident. So either way, you win. So the NGOs are running after grants here and there, and there is a lots of grants, by the way. Every Tuesday is when we do our grant review. This week, I can tell you there were at least 17 new donors who are throwing out grants for COVID-related things, actually. Okay, and then you have the traditional funders, the traditional donors who have a lot of money who still keep giving. There is a rise in local funding which is coming up, which I think we can leverage many of the things. And people are actually willing to support for-profit corporations like yours, Ashish, or for that matter, Raghu's, where there is a convergence of a mindful approach with a profitability mindset, or at least sustainability mindset. That's what it's all about. It's not about ridiculous profit. It's about sustainability. You sustain yourself. Today you help 20 kids. Tomorrow you can help 50 kids. That's a big difference. So it's a great sector to be in. You can do well for yourself. You can do good, and that's what defines our sector. And we can we can work with any sector, be it energy, be it education and everything in between. I'm looking forward to learning more from you two gentlemen, and of course Durga. Yeah. So let me stop there.
Thank you, Srini. Interesting. I think all of you are, from my discussions with you independently and here today, realize that you're all, quite inspirational in your own journeys. I think that the need of the hour is inspiration, right? I don't think it's about. I know, everyone says this is the new normal, but I call it the new zero. It's nothing normal. And what is normal in any case? Every day something changes in our normal lives. It's not that we have the same life every day, even before COVID. So I'm not in favor of the word new normal. I like to think of it as a second chance that all of us have been given to kind of forget all the mistakes we made and put aside take all the learnings we got, make use all the friends we've made in the past, and say, okay, if I was given this fresh slate to just go do something to conquer the world and create impact, so what would I do now? And obviously, it's like going back to school again, or being a golfer. My second putt always falls to the hole. The first putt, for some reason, misses. And you're like, oh, why couldn't it happen the first time? So for me, this is what I call the new zero. I think it's a chance for all of us to do right and do good. And of course, this COVID is going to create new ideas in people. And so that's where I want us to take the next set, next few minutes of our conversation into, because we've talked about technology, we've talked about convergence, we've talked about impact, we've talked about models that have worked in the past. Now, with this happening, there's going to be a huge amount of change in people's movement, right? Online versus offline, and what is the combination that will work or not work in your respective industries, and how to make that happen. And when we talk about collaborative model, we always collaborated, in my opinion. So I'm not sure what the new collaborative model is, but I think that's what the audience wants to hear. In each of your respective industries, there must be some changes that you are envisioning in the combination of this online, offline, keeping safety in mind, keeping the new rules, in mind. How would you make that happen, and how would you show reimagining livelihood to people in your respective industries? And maybe now we can start off with Raghu.
Good question. As I said, so I'll take this specific context of, the people who have gone back to the village from the big cities, particularly in Bihar, UP. We work in Eastern UP a little bit. We work in Jharkhand. So we have good, and Chhattisgarh. We have good, and of course, extensively in Maharashtra and MP. But the migrant workers are largely from Eastern UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh. Quite a few from the eastern part of India also. But I think we are all now coming to this conclusion that many of them are not going to come back. Partly emotional, they're all very upset with the way they have been handled. And partly some kind of a fulfillment, what is there in the city? I earned 15,000 bucks and I spend everything. So I've been saying this in every meet, and to everyone I thought that these migrants have not gone back to, these people who have gone from cities have not gone back empty-handed. They have gone back with tremendous amount of skill. For the first time in the independent India, we're going to be having more skills in the rural area for certain things than the urban area. And you will see many of these establishments in urban area which are dependent on these migrants will shut down because they're not going to come back. Many of them are not going to come back. Just take Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand has 1 crore people population in the state, and there are equal number, almost 1 crore outside. And they've been always talking about reverse migration. So for more than 10 years. And now it has happened naturally. So what we feel is that we need to, like we all discussed, we need to see this as an opportunity and create many pro-poor initiatives and help them to sustain, help them to enhance their livelihood, because they are going to be quite contented. They're not looking at huge profits. If someone had the skill of being a motor mechanic, he said he's trying to set up a workshop which can cater to the district or the neighborhood of 50, 60 kilometers and things like. So what I feel that is totally lacking, although there are so-called NBFCs and microfinancial institutions, their ticket sizes are very small. So the public sector bank or the formal banks won't give these guys the loan of 2 lakh. For example, we are trying to work with the small community of hairdressers. They are good. They were good. They were running decent saloons in Bombay, and they're back to Bihar, and they're selling their USPs that I know what is the style of Bollywood. I will do a better job than the existing barber here. And hence, if I set up a shop, I'm going to be more successful. All I need is about 2.5 lakhs as a capital. Now, nobody is going to give that because the banks are not used to that. The rural banks are used to only agricultural loans. They don't know how to fund a micro enterprise. Those who know how to fund a micro enterprise, their ticket size is 40, 50, 60,000. So I think access to finance is a very big challenge. And so if we kind of blend the energy, abundant energy, and reasonable amount of money, I think the transformative change will be very huge. That's what we are trying to work on in the post-COVID. So most of the management models are built around this assumption that there is a fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. Of course, they believe, in exploiting the poorest of the poor and reduce the size of the packet and make that shampoo at 50 rupee, 50 paise, 30 paise and all. But at the end of the day, unreasonable profit is a motive. I'm not talking like an activist, but that is a fact. They don't want to compromise their profit. So they're looking at the poorest to the poor of the country as a customer. They're not bothered about. That is why we see this problem today in COVID, because they're all customers. They're not part of our system. I'm looking at a system where we take their skills and send it to the urban area for consumption, whether it is online or offline. So let's see how it goes.
Thanks, Raghu. Let's hear what Ashish has to say. I'm sorry, I'm pushing you all a little bit. I'm watching the time as well. And I want to bring a conclusion on the collaboration before we finish the conversations. Ashish.
Yeah, I think in many ways I agree with Raghu quite a lot, because, I read a report where it said in 2035, more than 70% of India would be migrating to the urban areas. And I think that was a very worrying factor, because, we have such a lot of potential into the areas where they come from. And I think it is, I would like to set the COVID moving forward. You need to reset yourself and rethink where you're going to really start. And I think that's something which is extremely important. And what we learned from many of these things is that, we needed to constantly look at evolving technologies, although we're talking about 4G, 5G, but we always invested in something which can be delivered on 2G. And that's what I kept telling my technology guys, because many of these artists who have gone to the small villages, it was our fear also that we have actually spent so much skilling them. And now that they've gone back to those villages, whether they come back or don't come back, but I would like to see that they can continue to deliver from where they are. Sure. And the 2G is still working there. So we are actually making sure that we have centers into Amravati, in Kolhapur. And when there was no studio in, say, West Bengal, and I used to get at least about 100, 150 artists every year from West Bengal. Eventually, in 2007, 2008, we started building studios in West Bengal. And right now, I'm talking to the West Bengal government to form a policy for animation, gaming, visual effects, and comics, because we now have 40, 50 studios. I think that's the way we will have to move forward. And, when Srini said the first project that I got from Sony, I couldn't deliver it with the kind of people I had here, because nobody knew how to do the hand-on animation. So I went to Manila and I brought in 60, 70 artists from there, and I delivered, and I continue to do that whenever it comes to storyboarding and all, my studio always had at least 4 or 5 Manila, artists, and we are extremely, well versed with this collaboration that we have between, Manila and our studios, and many studios in India have artists from there because uh, it's a model where you need to see where you can actually get the best skills and how to collaborate, and if they are more comfortable in that environment. At one point in time, we had a lot of people from Kerala, but if they didn't get the right food in the studio, they would go back to Kerala someday. So we needed. I always made sure that I had a Kerala chef also supplying food there. I think it's a very important factor that the reverse process. People were only having one-way traffic from rural areas, people migrating to the urban areas, and this is the greatest opportunity. I think it's a reset time for many objectives, not only for NGOs or corporates, but also for the government to set up an infrastructure agenda into the tier 2, tier 3, and would like to see how it can work. So I'm running a program called My First Film with one of my colleagues. And what we are trying to do is that many of these artists who have gone back, we are giving them an entrepreneur package. And we would, because they today know extremely good filmmaking skills. So we are wanting them to start a small business of taking photographs and making films for birthday parties, wedding anniversaries, and all into their small villages or their areas and become an entrepreneur. So we are running this small program to convert that because we know many of them might not come back. And this was always a phenomenon with us because they came, but when their parents were not well, they all had to go back because in the Indian ecosystem, they are attached to their parents very well. And I think that's where this has come very handy. And I think it's a post-COVID situation where the skills that they have acquired, we need to find a way that they can deliver those skills from there, whether they contribute to your productions or they contribute to the ecosystem around that region. Is something that we need to do. And we are doing this model even with the Northeast because we have a large number of artists from there and there are no studios presently there. So we are trying to see if we can actually collaborate with some universities and start something there.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashish. Srini, what I'd like to ask you is before you get into your post-COVID discussion, I want you to answer that post-COVID situation, but then segue into the final round of discussion, which all of us will talk about at the same, together, rather than one by one, is the question of, is there going to be a challenge between the offline and online? Because we were all used to going somewhere, getting things done, whether we came from villages to cities or cities to villages. Travel is going to be difficult. People are going to be extremely conscious of getting ill and not being able to take care of themselves or their families. And so there's going to be some level of hesitation in meeting and working together, either in one closed environment or even traveling for business elsewhere. So I'm sure that that's going to have an impact on all of your businesses, both from a sales point of view, from an implementation point of view, right, and from a training or education point of view. And I'm sure all of you have thought about it. So Srini, if you could talk about the post-COVID thoughts of yours and then segue into this, and then Ashish and Raghu can join into that conversation.
Okay, so okay, it's two parts, but somehow they are both linked in many ways. In what we are doing, I used the word convergence before in passing. This collaborative models have been already been sort of happening in the last few years. Okay, maybe collaboration was a word used more as a lip service than real intention-wise, but that it was getting slowly a serious thing to do and the right thing to do as such. Governments need NGOs to deliver social services. I mean, the government, as much as it has money, doesn't have the wherewithal. I won't say wherewithal might be a wrong word, but doesn't have the capacity to deliver to the last mile. So they need NGOs. Similarly with the private sector as well. And the private sector, of course, has to work with technology companies or with the private sector or with the government to get credibility. So this kind of collaboration was happening. This collaboration is now getting accelerated, and hence the growth of a sort of a collaborative ecosystem, which has been, in the building block stage in the past 5 years, is now going to get now much more accelerated, is what I'd like to first point out. So it is for the better. However, when you're working with the disenfranchised, the last mile, physical presence becomes a real necessity. I mean, we are now, we've been given a grant by one of the largest banks in the world, and we have to work with hospitals on infectious disease prevention protocols.
Yeah.
There is no way, no matter how much we can deliver online training, there's no way that we can avoid going and getting things done, actually, whether it's a gap analysis, whether it is to teach protocols, whether it's to show protocols and things like that. But the myth that everything needs to be done in person is certainly busted nowadays. Okay, so people are able to become reasonably decent cooks by watching YouTube video. That should give some hope. I'm not sure if I want to be given CPR by somebody who's completely trained himself only in YouTube and not even using a dummy. So there are those things which are still going to be, require a crossover from the digital to the physical world. I was just reading a report, from my business school classmates. We keep exchanging the latest notes, and many of them are investment bankers and things like that. And if this does not continue beyond a certain point, people are going to come back with a vengeance to go back to the old normal, if I may say so. But the more it is getting delayed, I think at least people in my age and above, I think Ashish is still too young, are looking at like, do we really need this? Do we really need that? But I've got a 20-year-old son, who still has aspirations, influenced by all the crappy stuff he's seen on TV, and he wants to go out and do all those nonsense himself. He's not going to listen to me saying, no, you don't go to the city, be in the province, be whatever it is. The only dilemma I see in what also Raghu was proposing is that many of these migrant workers, and we're going to launch a large migrant worker program in India thanks to the German government, is that many of them are not entrepreneurs. Let's be very clear about this. Even in the realistic world, even before, not everyone was cut out to be an entrepreneur. I would sit down in a conference after conference as a speaker, as a participant, as a panelist, and they'd be talking about how a farmer can now become a small businessman and I've met with a lot of farmers who just want to just sell their produce to the closest aggregator and get it done with. They didn't want to go into post-harvesting facilities and all that stuff. So we also need to put that into context. Last 2 points, government has a big role to play in all of this in terms of the direction. The Philippines, and I just share that because there's so many others sitting in this session, had a program, and it still continues to have a program called Rural Impact Sourcing. What it was nothing but bringing the BPOs into the rural centers. We have had that in India. Now, I wouldn't consider Coimbatore or Pune or any other city as a rural city anymore, but certainly tier 3 cities, tier 4 cities, and get people to deliver BPO work out of their homes, probably out of technical vocational schools which were not being used in the evenings, but which had internet. So, all these video producers that Ashish talks about could go to a solid facility, work there in the evening for editorial work, not in their small apartment or small home with a lot of distractions. They could use these facilities, for example. So rural impact sourcing was in the process some time ago. Now it can really accelerate it. So many of these people who go back and stay back. Clearly, reverse migration is good. The Philippine government has just launched in the last 3 months a program called Balik Provincia. Provincia stands for province, of course, Balik means returning provincials. I mean, we had our migrant misery thing, but they put a very positive spin to it and said, okay, you returning migrants, now let's do something in our province. Access to finance is going to be a challenge. It was a challenge pre-COVID as well. It's going to remain a challenge post-COVID as well, and for the right reasons. So I'll stop there because I'm getting too ahead of myself. I think I'll let the others.
Would you all think that, from what you all shared, would you all think it would be too bohemian or too out there to consider a collaborative model that says, why would Raghu send a team of people to fix a solar panel, and then why would Ashish send a bunch of people to go get some training done, and why would Srini, go send a bunch of people to implement a project? Would you all come together and use one team with some diverse set of skills to get all three jobs done? So therefore reducing the number of people who have to travel, yet getting the job done. And so would that mean bringing different businesses and business people together, different ideas together, trying to collaborate and create common core strengths, which will then get the job done at with lesser impact on risk of health and other things? Would that be too much and too out of the box? So what do you think, Ashish?
See, I always believe that a great idea, it's not great if it cannot impact a large number of people.
Right.
And that's why we needed to always see that how we can make it larger, how scalable that idea is. And I think the success always lied in collaborating and spreading that idea to the right places as to how that fit of a jigsaw puzzle can happen, how it can actually really get spread. And I think that's where you need to think innovatively and see that that impact can actually be felt or experienced by a large number of people. In doing that, whether you have like-minded partners or not have like-minded partners, some people will have a commercial angle, some people might not have a commercial angle. You need to really see that for-profit and non-profit is always, complemented to each other. And you need to find ways. Like, I'll give you an example. There is a young designer in my society, and she is a very successful designer out of a fashion school. But in the COVID time, when we talked about the masks, she actually got a large number of tailors doing the mask, and we've just founded an NGO for her. The thing is that if I was involved with Indian skilling program under the Media and Entertainment Skill Council, and I know NSDC, I connected her to the Usha program where they donated, the Usha machines, and that's where the teaching for the tailoring happened. Now that collaboration, she cannot think of that collaboration. If you are able to just link these two and create a collaboration, you just imagine how big this thing can become. And she is not making masks to be sold. It's a mask which is done out of this whole resource is to be donated to the people who cannot afford it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so you need to also find. So I connected her to the Akshay Patra program because I'm involved with Akshay Patra here. So that the schools are going to open and all the school kids are going to get the mask, and the number is going to be very big. So we have 3 months in hand. How do you really put this 2, 3, 4 things together? Because that's the ecosystem that you need to build. And then there are donors. So you need to find a right fit for her to get that donation, get that clothing, and make sure that that goes to the right feed. People do it in their own places. It gets collected and it goes to the schools. And there is a distribution method to it. So I think it's an idea, but how it impacts the largest number of people, how scalable you can make it, the success lies there. And I think that's where the collaboration really needs to be worked. You need to have your design thinking hat and you need to have your collaboration hat always on. And that's only the way it can work.
So in a respect, and I think we're running out of time, so I from what I'm understanding, we need 3 areas and probably a group of people or peoples to come together to consider 3 areas to create a new collaborative model. One is ideation, the second is execution, and the third is measurement. And how do we do that, all 3 of that, by working together and reducing the footprint of travel or moving to offices or working collectively, but reducing that, but yet keeping everyone engaged in a livelihood. So I think that kind of a thought process is what will probably enable a new collaborative model. I think we've run out of time, gentlemen, but I've enjoyed talking to all three of you. Raghu, I'm sorry I couldn't get a closing note on yours, but if each of you could take just a few seconds to give a closing remark, I think we'll steal a little bit of time to get your closing remarks before we call it a close. So Raghu, your closing remark, and then we can move on to Srini and Ashish.
I think the discussion has been more on the collaboration or what are the mechanics. But I feel that at the highest level, I've been a donor. I mean, not my will, but as the treasurer of world's largest private charity in India. So I've been on the giving side and I've been on the receiving side. And I see that there is a huge disconnect. For example, I just give this example. United Way worldwide is the largest private charity. We raise $5 billion worldwide every year, out of which $4 billion is raised in US and spent in US. And India raises only 200 to 300 crores. And there was no spending on energy access. That is the area that I work when I joined the board of United Way 10 years back. And then when I started working with Asian Development Bank, which spends about $25 billion on energy funding, large and small and medium project, out of which at least about $2 to $3 billion go into smaller companies like us on impact-oriented funding. They never knew that there was a charity available and they could blend it. So I took it as a task, and it took 5 years to get, and being at the helm of affairs, to get the president of both these organizations to talk to each other and to create a synergy and to fund a bunch of villages in Maharashtra where we did microgrid using that approach. And of course, it was presented as a case study in Manila in the ASAF conference. But I think people live in their own world, and it's going to take a lot of time to get collaboration at that scale, big scale of money. That's very important. So that bothers me. At the NGO to NGO and at smaller organizations, the collaboration comes because of the need to work with each other. But a platform like what Meraklis is creating could be very useful. And India needs to create something like that. For example, Duke University has one where all grants are loaded, but it is like manless, faceless, almost useless, portal. There's no one to back you. If you have a query, you send an email, it takes years to respond. So I think where a portal like Meraklis can create a huge difference, we need to bring the donors and the receivers and the enablers all at one go and facilitate. Can't leave it all to the technology. So that's what I think we need to head for.
Thank you, Raghu, for your closing remarks. Srini, and then we'll wrap with Ashish.
I'd say some basic principles are needed for effective collaboration. So I'll just stick to 2 or 3. Of course, this does not apply to post or pre-COVID. It applies universally. I think collaboration needs open communication. It needs a shared agenda. It certainly needs a lot of trust, and trust can be built with open communication and a shared agenda. I think as long as those basic principles are there, I think collaboration is the way to go forward. It's not new at all, to be honest. People have been very, very successful partners and collaborators. If they are, particularly when it is about creating social impact, I think the intent is there. How you want to manifest it might differ from myself and maybe Ashish and Raghu. But if we three were to sit down and to discuss about, finding a common agenda, I'm sure it's possible. And from there on, it would be easy to build on that collaboration. That's how I would say I would use that as my closing remarks. Trust, communication, and shared agenda, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, Srini.
Yeah, I would like to only say something very personal to you, Durga, is that, in all these times when people are getting isolated, people are getting a lot of, under pressure because of unseen or unpredictable situations, and people don't know what's going to happen. I would only say my learning has been that, one should learn to be self-motivated. And if you are a self motivator, you can always come back and bounce back and do a lot of things. But while you actually practice this in life, please always practice one thing, that everything that you learn, you need to share. Because if you don't share, or you don't make a partnership or collaborate with somebody, that idea never becomes bigger. And I think that's the key learning that I had. And I think we should definitely keep our eyes and ears open to learn from others' experience, but also keep yourself self-motivated in such times, and move forward as to see how you can constantly share the knowledge that you have and the resources that you have, to make sure that you are, bringing more people under the fold, rather than restricting it to yourself. And that's the key, I would say, for moving forward.
Thank you, Ashish. Ashish, Raghu, and Srini, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure our audience has, really enjoyed this conversation with all of you. I will personally stay in touch with all of you, because I found that I learned a lot through this process, and it's been a pleasure meeting all of you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, Durga, 1 minute. I think
Yes.
we have to acknowledge there are many questions. So I have, as much as possible, I have responded. But you may want to say, as a moderator, that we will respond to the questions.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it on my screen. I was looking for these questions, and I was trying to search the screen while you were all talking.
At least three or four questions were maybe directly addressed to me, so I handled them. And I just wanted to say, if there is one more minute, I mean, these questions can be taken offline. Please feel free to mail me at raghu@nft.in, and then I will, discuss with each of you. Thank you so much.
What Raghu is, I will go through these questions, and I will make sure they're sent to all of you, so you can all respond to them independently. I was trying to look for the questions on this new platform, but for some reason I couldn't see it come up. All I could see was some waving hands and some thumbs up. So sorry about that, but I didn't want to break the flow of conversation in my search for the questions. But I will make sure they're sent to you and addressed.
Yeah, same here, Disha. I think there are some interesting questions about 900 children from the orphan age. They want to learn arts. I think we would like to definitely respond to them.
Absolutely. You will all get the questions that were brought up today, and I will send them all to all of you by email.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.